So in this video, I'm going to be talking to you about why cold calling makes you rich and calling people and interfering in people's business makes you rich. And this is something that I really struggled with because I tend to have a little bit of pleasing personality. I developed it. I wasn't like this when I was in school, but after school, I tend to develop this compliant behavior that I don't want to disturb anybody. And if you have this disposition that you don't want to disturb anybody, you're going to have a serious problem making money because you're going to have serious problem calling people because you think you're disturbing them. And you'll also have problem with getting what you want in life, what you really want, not the basics, but what you really want in life. You will have a problem because to get what you want, you will have to interfere. Dan Pena calls it stepping into the breach, disturbing somebody, essentially. I don't mean illegal stuff, but a phone call can sometimes disrupt somebody's day, disrupt somebody's thought process. You are being a little bit disruptive. And some people can have a problem with that. But starting a company and establishing a market position, you are being disruptive. And that's the only way to make money. And because the flow of money is happening and you're kind of out of this flow and it's being exchanged among people and there's this natural flow happening. It's very easy to sit back and be like, let other people make money. I don't really want to interfere. I don't want to bother anybody. I don't want to disturb anybody. I don't want to compete. And let me just sit on the sidelines and just watch the show. And if that's your disposition, because that used to be my disposition, that I wanted to make all the money without disturbing anybody, without getting in front of people's faces. But that doesn't happen. You will have to step into the breach. Even if you want to go out on a good date with a nice girl, at some point you have to say, excuse me, and introduce yourself. You have to interrupt the flow of where that person was heading and introduce yourself because that person is not coming to you. Similarly, money is not going to come to you. Money doesn't flow to you. Visualization helps, but still at some point, you will have to engage in an activity that causes a disruption in somebody's day, or you are interfering in somebody else's day. And you have to, the more you interfere in people's life, the more money you will make because you're diverting their attention to you. And once you do that, you have a shot. You have an opportunity to make a presentation, to make a proposal. And that's only going to happen when you know how to interfere, the right way to interfere, and for you to get them to pay attention. One of the incidents that I had shared early on is that I met the CEO of a $3.5 billion company in a 7-star hotel in Burj Al Arab, which in UAE, which is Burj Al Arab. And there was a Rotary meeting that I went there, and I saw the CEO of the billion-dollar company was sitting at the head of the table. There was a conference table. Many executives were there, and he was sitting at the head of the table, and he was about to give a presentation in 5-10 minutes. And I sat here. He was here, and I initially sat here. And when I entered, we made an eye contact, and I sat down. I was dressed like this. Then I was like, nothing is going to happen if I don't do anything. I didn't come here to make friends. I came here to find a board member. So I just stood and I went and I saw that he was about to sign a check to a banker. He signed the check and I sat right next to him. And it was a little bit disruptive because I didn't ask for his permission whether I can sit next to him or not. And I just went directly. Hi, my name is Prithvi. Where are you from? And I introduced myself. I introduced what I do. I'm creating a healthcare company, etc., etc. And that's how I got to know him. But I had to stop. I had to interrupt. I had to get his attention. There is always, everything begins with that moment of interruption. where I interrupted him. Was he disturbed? Probably. But I didn't care. I just went straight in. If somebody else could have interrupted him, he would have gotten that opportunity. But I interrupted him and I disrupted. He was a little bit startled because when I entered, instead of sitting, I went straight and I was standing initially. And then I introduced myself and then I sat down. And I didn't ask for his permission. I just sat down. And then throughout the meeting, throughout the session, I was having a conversation with him and I was kind of in front of his face. And then once I presented the opportunity, his eyes lit up and he gave me his card and he said, I'm looking for board positions. I would love to have a conversation with you. I got his interest and then we set up a meeting. We agreed to have a meeting and then he said, could you send me the email, the files, etc. And then, we'll set it up. I sent him the files and no response. No response. I sent him an email. He asked me to send the email, no response. But I have his phone number. I dialed the phone. He did not pick up. But I remembered during the meeting, one of his family members was calling him and his phone was ringing loud. So in the middle of the presentation, the phone was ringing, which means he doesn't put his phone on silent. This is an important guy. He wants to keep his phone silent. He wants to keep his phone loud. He doesn't want to miss any calls. So his phone was ringing really loudly. I remember that. And I was like, if I kept calling him, he'd pick up. And I was like, you should not do this. This is a CEO of a $3.5 billion company. He may shout at you. He may think it's rude. But I was like, fuck everything. I'm going to call him. And I called him once. He did not pick up. He didn't have my number. Called him second time. He did not pick up. Third time, he did not pick up. Fourth time, he picked up. And he said, hello. And I was like, oh, hi, so-and-so. This is Prithvi. We met in Burj Al Arab. And he was like, oh, hi, how are you doing? I forgot I didn't have your number. I didn't ask for your number. I just gave you the card. I didn't, nobody's, yes, our meeting. Of course, I went through your presentation. How about we meet at so-and-so time? And we met. And he became my business partner. The rest is history. And it all started with interruption. You have to be willing to interrupt somebody. And it's okay to interrupt. A lot of people think it's not okay to interrupt. I have met public companies which had, $10 billion public companies. I have met multi-billion-dollar public companies. I have met high-profile CEOs, high-profile lawyers. There was one time I was around a very high-profile senior partner in PricewaterhouseCoopers, one of the top accounting firms. And I had a meeting with him and he asked me, how did you find me? I'm not like a public figure. How did you find me? And I was like, I messaged 100 people in your firm. And some of these people blocked me. But I messaged 100 people in his company. And I kept asking for recommendations and they gave me about 10, 12 recommendations. Most of them didn't reply. Some of them replied. And then I finally had one of these contacts and I reached out to him and finally got the meeting. And he actually was nice enough to take me around Abu Dhabi. He said, I'm going to show you Abu Dhabi and we can get to know each other and I can share about my background and we can discuss the project. So that was an interesting meeting. He came in his Porsche and he showed me around Abu Dhabi and we traveled. But that was because I interrupted. I interrupted 100 people to get to him. Imagine going through 100 gatekeepers to get to somebody. And I was willing to do that. And it did not take me a lot of effort because messaging people isn't that hard. Okay, so that's the lesson. Interrupt. It's not illegal to interrupt people if you're not touching them. If you're at a distance, interrupt them. And that's why people don't like cold calling and people don't like cold approach, where it's a stranger, you don't know them, and you open the conversation. That's how I met the guy who was worth around 500 million pounds. I was in Bangalore. There was a health club that I was in. It was a high-end health club. And I saw this guy walk in. And when he walked in, the room went quiet and the staff became really careful and scared. So I knew he's a high-powered guy, and I went and sat right next to him the next day, and I just went boom. I made a comment about him, that he has a charismatic personality, etc., etc. And we started to have a conversation, became friends, and he invited me to his house in London. And I told him about my mentor and how I'm going to this castle seminar. And he said, if you're going to Scotland, come visit me in London. And I visited him in London. Started with interruption. And you would never want to interrupt. If you're a good person, if you consider yourself a good person, you don't want to interrupt. But that's what you have to do. You got to interrupt. And never be shy to interrupt, because that's how you re-divert the flow of money. You're re-diverting the flow of opportunity. And it's a very natural process. Even if you have to drink water from a stream and you have to redirect it in your direction, you have to interrupt the flow of water to redirect it. Same thing works for the money. Money is flowing in a certain direction, established structure. You are stepping into the breach and you're capitalizing on the opportunity. You are being disruptive. So don't expect harmony in the midst of disruption. And that's how in the olden times, when people used to invade countries, they would interrupt everything. The more interruption they caused, the more money they made. Some of the most ruthless invaders, were the richest. Some of the most ruthless invaders were the richest. If you go to France ever and you visit the Palace of Versailles, all of that palace and all of that beauty came out of war and came out of interruption. It did not come out of harmony, right? Of course, this is a metaphor. We are not doing anything illegal. We are not talking about doing something violent, but we are talking about creating an interruption. So that's the reason why cold calling works, and anything where you have to step outside your comfort zone and leave the position of comfort for something you want, you'll have to interrupt the pattern. Your own pattern of not interrupting and somebody else's pattern. So that's today's video. If you like the video, hit that subscribe button and I'll talk to you soon.